Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
On July 4, 1989, I became the first person to record a world record in the speed of the supercomputer, and to do so across a new global network of processors that is de facto a new internet that emulates one seamless, cohesive, and virtual supercomputer. That paradigm shift that emerged from my invention was that I achieved that world record across the slowest processors in the world rather than on the fastest processor in the world, as was argued by both Seymour Cray and Gene Amdahl. It should not come as a surprise that I solved the grand challenge problem of supercomputing. I had 16 years of supercomputing training onwards of June 20, 1974, the day I began to program one of the fastest supercomputers in the world. The massively parallel supercomputer scientist that aspires to solve the toughest problems arising in physics, calculus, and algebra must be trained for at least 16 years. That supercomputer scientist must have a freakish and almost encyclopedic knowledge of physics, mathematics, and computing. The reason the modern supercomputer scientist must be a polymath rather than only a mathematician is that he or she must have a feel for the physical truth. Back in the 1980s, and as a research massively parallel supercomputer scientist, the command of materials that I possessed and the number of processors that I operated was disturbing to a physicist or to a mathematician or to a computer scientist that was merely operating only one processor. My scientific knowledge as a lone research massively parallel processing supercomputer scientist had to be greater than the knowledge of Seymour Cray and Gene Amdahl, the two leading minds in the world of the sequential processing supercomputer, who were supported by a team of 1,000 scientists. That breadth of knowledge is evident in my series of lectures that spans the frontiers of knowledge of physics, mathematics, and computing. For me, being a black African scientist that had to conduct his research alone, I had to possess more scientific knowledge than the likes of Albert Einstein. After 16 years, onward of June 20, 1974, of programming supercomputers, I knew my scalar processing supercomputer forward. I knew my vector processing supercomputer backward. And I knew my massively parallel supercomputer sideways. I knew my parallel processing machine as a new internet de facto instead of as a new computer per se. I knew the Philip Emeagwali computer cold. I knew my new computer forward and backward and sideways. It's my 16-year-long mastery of extreme-scale computational physics and my command of mathematical materials, as well as the complete control of my 64 binary thousand processors that gave me a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Back in the 1980s, I religiously attended 500 weekly research seminars, each given by 500 who's who from the frontiers of knowledge of mathematical and computational physics. Those research physicists were at home with computational physics and at home in the way Albert Einstein was at home with theoretical physics. Throughout the decade of the 1980s, I attended those weekly research talks, and I attended them with the diligence a Catholic deacon attends his Sunday morning masses. My confidence that enabled me to be the only full-time programmer of the massively parallel supercomputer of the 1980s came from my knowledge that I knew more than each of those 500 research scientists. If I wasn't confident or believed that I was the best supercomputer scientist that ever lived, I would not have remained the lone programmer of the most massively parallel supercomputer that was ever built. Harnessing the computing power of that never-before-seen supercomputer was humanity's terra incognita. Thank you.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.